Are you supporting a loved one, colleague, or friend through the federal uncertainty that's out there right now? Possible job loss or cutting in grants? Me too. I'm actually in a federal funded entity, and I also have a partner who is working with people that are on federal grants. And both of us have learned of colleagues who have not only taken a job, taken different jobs, or taken a job loss, but are just dealing with a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen. And in this particular video, I actually want to offer those people out there that are providing that emotional support for others some tips to kind of help you deal with that stress. And really, we want to acknowledge the weight of that, the what you're feeling when you're trying to always be buoyant for the other people, either in your household or on your team. What does that look like for you? And what are some tips that you could help use that would help coach you through what you might be experiencing as as that emotional support person? So stick with me here. We're going to talk about what we can do. And this is not about, trying to fix your person, but rather finding some clarity and resilience for you during this process. So, our first tip we have here is to practice holding space for that person rather than filling it. Now, you may hear this idea of holding space and be rolling your eyes. I know you're skeptics out there. That's okay. I also used to think it was kind of a fluffy term and it didn't mean anything, but it can kind of help sometimes if you think of it almost like a physical space. And the idea really is to be present with someone's emotions without trying to react or fix them. Just letting them have those letting them have those feelings. And so I had a friend at work who actually described it as like a physical space. And if you can almost think of it as like a welcome mat that you're standing on the other side of, like you're welcoming that person to come to you, share what's going on for them, but it's going to stay there on that mat. And that can kind of help in a sense as well of you don't need to absorb it. And that's really what helps with when you're, wanting to be there for people is you don't want to necessarily start reacting or take that on because then you're both in a spiral. So as much as possible, thinking of that as, hey, I've got you. You can have this space right here. One of those, one of the things that I have to remember when I'm personally trying to do this for my partner or colleague or team is that often what people need is just your undivided attention. And whereas a lot of times we find our brains trying to like get into fix it mode or thinking of our response, really sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is just, again, notice somebody, give them that attention. And honestly, just let silence do some of the work. That can be a really nice way of responding. And again, you don't have to have a perfect response. We're not here to be perfect. We're here to offer that person that you love and work with that space. So sometimes when I don't know what to say, one thing I will do is validate that person. And this is often what I do when, for me, the silence gets uncomfortable, or it looks like there might be waiting for something, or they've maybe started talking but hesitated a little bit. You might ask some questions. And again, we want this to sound sincere and not sappy, but it might sound like, the validation piece might say, like, hey, I am really sorry you're going through this. This sounds really tough. Um, you might also, while you're being quiet and listening to this person, kind of try to mirror calming expressions. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I mean, we have neurons in our brain, and you're going to tell right away that I am not a scientist, but we naturally start to mirror people. So if you've ever been around somebody who's crossing their arms, you might do the same thing. But we can also use that consciously to try to, lower the temperature of a conversation. So if we remain kind of open, nodding, giving that kind of like affirmation through our body language, that can help that other person that's talking with you and is on the other side of that conversation start to relax a little, and hopefully their nervous system will go down a notch. So in my own experience, when I am offering validation, I have to really be careful to not try to explain away something on another person's behavior. So, for instance, if my partner's come home and complained about a colleague or a boss or something that happened at work, I have possibly in the past said something along the lines of, maybe they're just having a bad day, or you never know, maybe their cat's lost. That was one I used a lot when we actually lost our cat for a while because I knew how rubbish I was feeling and and feeling and behaving at work at that time. But when your partner or the person you're trying to engage with is trying to let you know about something that's going on with them, it can feel a little bit like you're not acknowledging what's going on for them if you're trying to go into the other person's thinking that's not even there in the room. So I found it better to be using that kind of language I suggested, which is, I'm sorry you're going through this. Yeah, that sounds crappy. And I found that had such a better effect with my partner. So give that a try. So the second thing to kind of keep in mind when you're trying to offer that support to your loved one or colleague is try not to get into the problem solving mode or offering solutions, but rather just stay curious. It's not that someone might not eventually ask for your advice, but you kind of want to let that come from that person. In this first stage, we're just trying to help that person get their emotions articulated and possibly even process through some of that. And I do have another video on what that can look like when you're kind of identify your thoughts and the emotions you might be experiencing. So check that out if it might be helpful. But we want to kind of shy away from that at least until our person has told us that that's what they're asking for. So it's natural to want to try to help somebody who's in pain, or if you think you've got a great solution, or if something like that's happened to you. This is where I fall down. I'm always trying to like, hey, I was in that situation and this is what I did. But at this point, as much as possible, and again, don't beat yourself up if you do offer some advice, but try to just stay curious. And again, as I mentioned under that first tool, that would just mean maybe asking some questions and trying to get that person to, recognize what their thoughts and feelings are. And that can kind of look like, what do you think you might try next? Or what would look different for you in this situation? Or what's been the hardest about this? Particularly if someone's not quite sure how they're feeling, or if they're just presenting with one kind of strong emotion like anger or fear, getting them to kind of answer a question kind of gets their brain set in motion as well and can kind of get them from like just sinking into a loop that just, where they're just ruminating the same, saying the same thing. Again, be cautious, read the tone, make sure it seems appropriate to insert a question, but sometimes when you feel like they're getting close, that can be a nice way to kind of draw them out a little bit more. And another question might just be, how can I support you through this? Again, it's letting that person know what they might need. And maybe that's just you listening. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's, taking over some of the chores that evening. Whatever that might look like for that person, and try to be open to that. And if you can't give it, that's okay too. But find out what you think they might need. It also kind of helps both of you get into that solution process where they're thinking, "Oh yeah, what would look better for me in this case?" rather than just necessarily ranting about this, and that can have an initial positive effect. But beyond that, what might be something I want to do? So, the third tip for you if you're, you know, helping someone through something difficult, particularly this constant uncertainty we're feeling in our federal situation, is you want to sort of set an emotional boundary, but you want to do that with compassion. And that again is in order so that you're supporting rather than personally absorbing all that feelings. And this isn't easy. This takes practice. And you might still find that after a conversation like this, your emotions are running high, particularly if, like I said, it's something you're kind of new at, or you usually go into solution mode. But one of the ways to think about a boundary in this case is not something you're telling the other person that you're going to do, rather trying to control their behavior. It's not about trying to control their behavior. It's rather recognizing what you might do. If this happens, then this will happen. Then this is the reaction I might have. Or if this continues, goof up. So the thing about the definite, excuse me, goof up. So, the definition I want us to consider for this part here is that a boundary isn't some way you're going to try to control another person's behavior. You better do this or else. Rather, it's telling the person what, and often you don't need to say anything at all, but it's knowing yourself what you're going to do. If this happens, then this is what will, this will be this is what I will do. And that might look like, for me, it might be, I want to be here for you, but if you raise your voice again, I'm gonna need to take a break. Again, this is something you don't have to be explicit about at all. You can certainly let that person know if a behavior occurs that you're not comfortable with, but it's really just protecting yourself. And we're doing this in order to remain supportive to that person. Anger is one of those for me. If I someone raising their voice or taking something out on me, man, that gets me triggered pretty quickly, and so you wanna recognize that about yourself and just kind of set that. Either sometimes you have to do like, say it out loud to the person you're supporting, particularly if this is kind of an ongoing thing, but sometimes it's just something that you know about yourself. So, that will give you permission to show up well, but not perfectly. Again, this isn't about perfection. We don't want that to get in the middle of you being able to support somebody. So this might look like, again, I just want to give you an example for like a colleague. I have a colleague that will often put things in the shared chat at work that are very scared, fear based. What's going to happen next? Is everybody losing their job? I just heard about this colleague who lost theirs. And that's fine. I understand they're worried. And sometimes I can get in there and say, oh, yeah, that sounds rough. And then sometimes I just know my own emotional temperature just can't handle that at the moment. And so I don't say anything to this person. I don't try to change their mind or anything like that. I simply just turn it off. So I know in my emotional boundary in this situation that if this happens, then I'm just going to turn off this chat and just not be a part of it for right now. And then when I'm feeling more buoyant, I might go in and, try to express support. So the one last thing I want to just add here, and this has been something that our team at work has found, is that it's okay as well to be doing okay yourself. People are going to, interpret things differently. They're going to have their own emotions and bring all sorts of things to the table. And if you're going through this and feeling pretty emotionally stable, or if you're not even a part of the federal system and, you're not having to deal with any of this, bringing guilt into it doesn't really help. It doesn't mean that you can't be supportive. And I'm finding this true for myself on my team. Although, as I said, there's several ways that my job could be impacted. We are not necessarily on the most insecure side of things. And so when I hear about colleagues that have lost their jobs, yeah, I totally feel for them. And also, I'm able to manage my emotions around that. So it's really just to acknowledge that there is some survivor's guilt sort of thing going on there. But to remind yourself that being calm and being centered, if that's how you're feeling, like don't fake it, but that helps calm everybody around you. And that's true for what I found at home and also what I found on my team. So, friends, you can't stop someone from suffering. You can't really stop adults from doing much at all if they're going to do that. And as we know, a lot of people are going to be suffering by their own, thoughts and emotions running wild. What we can do is coach ourselves to try to remain strong and stable when we're in a position to find that ourselves where we're the ones that can provide support. And we need that out there, but we also need our own tools to make sure that we're mentally elastic enough to kind of handle that. So if this video has helped you feel clearer about how to show up without getting burnt out, please hit subscribe. And if you have some tips for the rest of the viewers here that you could share in the comments, if you feel comfortable doing so, I'd love to hear them. I'm looking for them all the time for myself. And if you feel like your loved one might benefit from another video directed towards federal workers or people that are in kind of that constant layoff threat, I do have a mini series that you'll find here. So be sure to check the rest of those out. And again, I'm thinking of you. I get this is a hard time and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.